Hi, I'm Jim O'Shaughnessy, and welcome to Infinite Loops. Sometimes we get caught up in what feel like infinite loops when trying to figure things out. Markets go up and down, research is presented and then refuted, and we find ourselves right back where we started. The goal of this podcast is to learn how we can reset our thinking on issues that hopefully leaves us with a better understanding as to why we think the way we think and how we might be able to change that to avoid going in infinite loops of thought. We hope to offer our listeners a fresh perspective on a variety of issues and look at them through a multifaceted lens, including history, philosophy, art, science, linguistics, and yes, also through quantitative analysis. And through these discussions, help you not only become a better investor, but also become a more nuanced thinker. With each episode, we hope to bring you along with us as we learn together. Thanks for joining us. Now please enjoy this episode of Infinite Loops.
Jim O'Shaughnessy is Chairman and Co-Chief Investment Officer of O'Shaughnessy Asset Management, where Jamie Catherwood is an associate. All opinions expressed by Jim, Jamie, and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of O'Shaughnessy Asset Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Clients of O'Shaughnessy Asset Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Well, hello, everyone. It's Jim O'Shaughnessy with my colleague Jamie Catherwood for yet another edition of Infinite Loops. I am very excited about today's guest. And unfortunately, because of scheduling, we had to reschedule this so many times. Her patience was legendary, and I really appreciate it. And my guest today is Denise Shull, the author of Market Mind Games, a radical psychology of investing, trading, and risks, and is also a principal at the Rethink Group. Welcome, Denise.
Jim, thanks so much for having me.
This is so much fun.
Finally happened.
Yeah, me too. I think your book is really fascinating because you come at this kind of 180 degrees from the other side that you normally hear, from normal advice that I would normally give too. So what I'd like you to do is just kind of walk us through the thesis. And I've read it, so I kind of know, but for our listeners' benefit, I'd rather you take us through it. And then I'm just going to jump in and kibitz with questions. So the thesis is that emotions are very powerful. They are required to making decisions. And then you have some solutions around how you can do that to make your trading or investing. And the way I read it, by the way, was more from a trading side, and we're more longer term folks. So we'll get into that though, too. But please.
Yeah. So I would just say right off the bat, I think of it as like the human brain versus a risk decision. And so whether you make 100 a day or 100 a year, or even whether you're a pitcher for the Mets and you have to make a pitching decision, like your brain looking at situation, what's happening is the same because you're human, basically. So I don't think the trading investing thing so much matters, but you're right. It was written a little bit more towards traders. So it came from the fact that I had this master's degree in neuropsychoanalysis before I became a trader. And then like years later, after I'd been trading and managing some trading desks, this little institute wanted to publish that. And I was like, it's like a decade old. You're going to look idiotic. But yes, in order to be published in an academic journal, I will update it. And when I did, Antonio Damasio, particularly, he's at University of Southern California now, and some other people, but primarily him, had shown that we literally cannot make a decision without emotion. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like all this, take the emotion out of it. If you literally could do it, you couldn't decide. And I was just like, this like changes everything. When here we are. So the thesis of the book is to explain that to people. And there are things like the obvious is confidence, or in more of my clients these days are primarily hedge funds. I have some long only funds, but the emotion in investing is conviction, which is an emotion. It's like a physical experience of belief. In trading, it's more confidence. But people don't think of those things as an emotion. Emotion is only the exaggerated, disruptive, like compelling. Well, that's actually not true. We don't make a decision on the data. It seems like we make a decision on the data in our analysis. We make the decision on how confident we are in the implication of. And just to further complicate it right now, which maybe I shouldn't do, but I'm going to go ahead and do, what the latest research is showing, which isn't in the book so much, I might touch on it, but it wasn't anywhere near as clear when I wrote that book, is that we make the decision based on the prediction of a future emotion. So like we do our analysis, however we come to our market analysis, and we feel confident that if we buy this name or buy this asset, it's going to go up. Well, what we're really doing is predicting that in the future, we're going to feel satisfied, happy, safe because this worked out. And that's the future emotion that actually causes us to say, buy it. So the book, it's first largely about persuading people that that's true. And then I get into the fact that these feelings and emotions, which I'll use that term interchangeably, but happen in a layered way. So there's like relatively superficial feelings that everybody in the market has, like fear of missing out or fear of future regret, which is like probably the single most important one the average person can work with. And then it gets into all kinds of personal feelings that are self-image and success expectation related. So basically, I just try to explain that.
So that's fascinating. I actually agree with you about people not making decisions rationally. It's been a theme of mine for a long time. They say they do, but they don't. And by the way, this is true for everything, not just investing. What happens is they often, as you say, make the decision emotionally, even if they're unaware that it is being made emotionally. And then they try to paper it over after the fact with rationality. I use a GIF on Twitter all the time, which is this young guy saying, because of reasons.
I haven't seen that one. I've seen some of your others, particularly the guy, I think, with the cigar and the martini or like.
So what do you think about, because I'm going to ask you, I'm going to pretend like I'm your hedge fund client and I want you to maybe interact with me and tell me what I'm doing wrong. But I don't know if you've seen it, but Adam Grant has a new book out called Think Again, which I think is really a great book.
I've seen it, but I haven't read it.
Okay. So I read a lot and I read that book and I think it was great. One of the things that came up in that book, though, is that he's quoting neuroscientists' recent research right now. And he's claiming that they're seeing that when somebody's core beliefs are challenged, that it often bypasses, it activates the amygdala, I love that word, and kind of bypasses all of the reason, all of the prefrontal cortex, all that kind of stuff, and goes straight to the what he refers to as the lizard brain. What do you think?
Well, to be blunt, I don't think we have a lizard brain. I don't think our brain is broken into three parts. I don't think the amygdala is like the center of emotion. And I don't think these things, because the neuroscientists I follow don't think these things. That's not just my opinion. So my favorite current book is 7.5 Lessons About the Brain by Lisa Feldman Barrett. Now, Lisa says a couple things, all of the things I just said. We don't have a triune 3-part brain. Reason isn't stuck in the frontal cortex. The amygdala isn't. We don't have a lizard brain. Now, she's on the East Coast. There's another scientist at Stanford, Brian Knudsen, who has done a lot of work. I met him through the Society for Neuroeconomics, which is like the brain on risk, basically. And he's done a lot of work about like how this emotion thing really works in a decision. And he's the one who's shown that we're always predicting these future feelings. And so like in my own coaching work, that's a cornerstone, always helping someone figure out what they're really predicting, which most of the time they're completely unaware of. And that's what's actually driving that. So in Knudsen's world, it's anticipatory affect, meaning anticipating a future feeling. Now, he and Lisa disagree a little bit over, are there parts of the brain? Lisa is kind of like, you're always using your whole brain and it depends on which culture you were raised in. And like, this is something I do know, that if you were raised in an Asian culture and you watch your brain do 2 + 2 = 4, it does it in a different way than you and I that were raised with English language. So that tells you something, like it's not set. But Brian can be a little bit more parts of the brain, but he will say at the same time that if you don't have this anticipating of a feeling, anticipatory affect, you're dead. So it's kind of definitive. The truth is the cognitive behavioral model is still, you're thinking and you're behaving, is still the dominant model in psychology, behavioral finance, and probably even neuroscience. I think it's missing the point. Like, if it's true that you have to have, let's just say you have to have confidence to make a decision, or you might have fear, but what you're doing there is you're predicting if you do this thing, you will avoid the threat of whatever you're afraid of. Therefore, you'll be safer in the future. So the feeling is fear, but the future emotion prediction is more safety and confidence. So I got myself off my own track there on what I was at, where I was going with that point. So you'll just have to bring me back because I've lost the plot.
Well, that happens to me a lot too. So as you were talking, I was thinking of the philosopher Jed McKenna, who says we are emotion-based creatures and the primary motivating emotion is fear. And then I think of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. And that's all sort of the blueprint, I guess, if you will, for much of myth, which fuels many of our stories. Something that I've loved to drive down those rabbit holes, because the too long didn't read version is most things are started as marketing campaigns.
That's probably true.
So creation myths, for example, I love Greek mythology because to explain the seasons, they would, would take them an hour, because the seasons happened because of Persephone, who was the daughter of Demeter and Zeus, and Hades had a thing for her. And so he came and took her down to the underworld, and that caused winter. And so Persephone, her mom, went down, negotiated with Hades, and she got to come up on top of the earth for half the year, which was spring and summer. But we laugh now, but I was in Africa and there was this perfect sunbeam coming through the clouds. And we were on this huge desert and it looked godlike. And I turned to my wife and I said, how do you blame ancient peoples for seeing that with no knowledge base at all and not saying, oh, that's the gods, right?
Right.
So I think that because of aggregate cultural evolution, which we're lucky to have, I think, because it gives us these little gadgets and what we're doing right now. But to get back to the point that you were making, you're saying that you think most of cognitive research is headed down the wrong path. You think that, and correct me if I'm summarizing wrong, your thinking is that much of the current consensus, if you will, in cognitive psychology, let's take the patron saint, Danny Kahneman. Okay. Are you saying Danny's wrong?
Oh my goodness. Put me on the spot. Yeah, basically.
Okay. I'm going to lead with that.
Now, in my defense, his book, which I can see right over there, I can't tell you exactly what page, but I can tell you approximately what page, 642 or 43 in there. He says, this is paraphrasing him, I know all this stuff and there's really not much I can do about it either.
I know. I love that quote.
So we're just stuck?
It's great because, again, Markowitz, the founder of the Efficient Frontier, what did he do when he was making his allocations? He did the heuristic a third. He had three options. So he gave a third of his money to each one of those options. And when questioned, as he should have been by his grad students, professor.
Right. This doesn't seem all that.
This doesn't seem anything like the theory that you're winning all this praise for. And he goes, I didn't want to experience regret.
Well, that was sort of smart in a certain sort of way. But yes. So in other words, he was predicting a possible future emotion and doing what he needed to do to avoid that future emotion so he could feel safer. But the other thing most people don't know about Markowitz, and I use a picture of this in most of my presentations, the opening paragraph says, stage one of portfolio management is using your observations, this again paraphrase, using your observations and experiences and deciding what you believe. Stage two is taking those beliefs and allocating to a portfolio. This paper the one that won the Nobel Prize, deals with stage 2. And then at the end of the paper,
So he qualifies it.
Well, he says you got to know what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you know what you believe, you can't do this allocating thing. And at the end of the paper, he says like 3 or 4 times, now, don't anyone here forget, I skipped stage 1. Stage 1's important. I'm not in a position to explicate stage 1. Like somebody else needs to do that. So like if you believe something, you feel comfortable that it's true, which gives you a sense of confidence, which gives you a sense of safety, current and future emotions.
So, okay, that's interesting. I didn't know about that first part of the paper. And I've read it.
Neither did anyone else in finance.
Yeah. Well, I've read it several times and I obviously glossed over that, which is something that I find interesting as well. I want to get back to Danny Kahneman in a minute here. So one of my hypotheses is that you're better off when you're talking about beliefs, at least I believe, that you're better off trying to put them in the framework of my thesis is. And the reason I believe that is that models are meant to be tested, are meant to be corrected, are meant to make it easier for you to take all of the evidence that's in front of you. And when new evidence comes, incorporate it. In other words, correct your errors, because we are continually making errors. But if we're doing things right, we're continually correcting those errors. And the outcome should be better predictions. And one of the things that I have observed is that, and you don't have to spend more than an hour on Twitter or any of the social media to see this in real time. People often conflate their beliefs with their sense of self, and it becomes part of their personality, which becomes, I will die on that hill. And I always joke that I subscribe to the General George S. Patton view that I want to make the other poor dumb bastard die on his hill rather than me dying on mine. Let's say I'm coming to you and saying, Denise, I've read a lot about you, and there's some really interesting things that I've read about you that we're going to get to nearer the end of the podcast. But you certainly heightened my interest. And you're this rock star coach, and I've been really successful in my hedge fund, but now I am a bundle of doubts. I am like, this is not the world that I think the world should work. And obviously this isn't me. I'm creating this character.
Yeah, I know.
Right. Because I think the market's always right. And we need to adapt ourselves to it. But so I'm going to hire you. So give me our first session. What are you going to do?
When did that start, Jim? Like, think back, and you felt one way, and then you started to feel another way,
and so for all of our listeners, I am creating on the fly, out of whole cloth, a character. I know people like this, so this is a composite. Denise, this started really, honestly, during the great financial crisis, and I saw people I know that should have gone to jail, and they walked away scot-free. And it made me start thinking that our system is rigged.
I'm reacting to being on the spot. So I'm going to talk about what I would do, probably in a little bit more sense than actually doing it. What would go through my head is, so if the system's rigged, what feelings does that leave you with? I would probably ask that question. System's rigged. So then once that realization came, like, what did it feel like to be in this business?
Yeah. So again, this is kind of fun because we're both creating these characters as we're going along. So let's say that I think that it used to be fair and free because it agreed with my hypotheses. and now, gosh darn it, it's not agreeing with my hypotheses anymore. And I think that therefore it's rigged. And I'm obviously making this pretty easy on you because I'm externalizing my agency and blaming others for my failures. But please.
Well, let's say that were true. Let's say that someone had done really well. And then after the financial crisis, like forever, for now 13 years or whatever it's been, they struggled, and they could say that their view of the arena changed. So when their view of the arena changed, they could have felt a few things. They could have felt confusion. They could have felt anger. They could have felt guilt for profiting. Now, anger usually ends up being the most interesting and the most powerful in getting people to realize when they have justified anger and then how to react to that. But that's usually like takes a long time to do because people feel really guilty about being angry. But in this, and there's all kinds of things in society about don't be angry and all kinds of things in religion and all kinds of things about positive thinking and that.
Yeah.
But in your case, you said some people should have gone to jail. So that suggested that like you were really seriously annoyed or disgusted.
Right.
Or both. So you may have gone from thinking that you were in like a noble world to being in a not so noble world. And maybe you're uncomfortable with that. So then you're conflicted about, well, I could still capitalize on this, but like, is that unethical to me and my own value system? And then that gives you this conflict. And this happens all the time, that I work with someone to uncover what they're really feeling. And there's some fundamental conflict. Like they feel two things. And so sort of one day they'll act out of one set of feelings and the other day they'll act out of the other set of feelings. And they can't resolve it. But in the coaching, we end up resolving it, like in getting them centered in what they really do feel, what they believe, convicted in, and then able to use their intuition. And I know to a quant, this is probably, and to a semi-behavioral finance guy, like there's all sorts of research on how intuition can be valid. The problem is no one's been taught to use it. Like no one's been taught to work with themselves. Like we have the wrong model of the machine. So therefore, then there's all these things. And this even gets back to Kahneman. When your model is cognitive behavioral, thinking and behaving, as opposed to where the juice is, feeling, you're not going to solve the problem. It's a little bit of a flat earth problem. I mean, only looking at cognition and behavior is kind of thinking that the earth of the human brain is flat. The truth is, if you keep sailing, you're going to sail all the way around. Well, that gives you a whole bunch of other options that you don't know you have if you only look at cognition and behavior, or you only assume the earth is flat. So for your hypothetical portfolio manager, my guess is if he or she were really not as productive as they used to be, and they were angry about people not going to jail, and then it sort of changed their viewpoint of the game they play, that they might sort of feel guilty about playing the game and angry that there's been some clearly unfair playing of it. And then that's getting in their way because they will use their cognition to try to talk themselves out of that thing. But actually, both of those emotions are trying to give them some useful piece of information. And what the research shows, well, then I'll stop. But there's all kinds of research that shows, like if we have a feeling and we purposely try to override it, it actually gets more intense. It gets louder. Because somewhere in there, your psyche is trying to deliver you a piece of useful information that relates to your overall safety and survival. And if you ignore it, the psyche gets louder. The feeling gets worse. And what usually happens is people then act out the feeling and they blame the feeling. Like if I hadn't had the feeling, I wouldn't have acted out. But the real problem is their strategy for the feeling, because they're missing the fact that feeling has information in it.
Okay. So
this is taking you all sorts of places here.
So you must be do you know John Sarno's work?
I know of him.
Okay. So you might like reading his books because...
Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, please.
I have a client who, well, I haven't worked with this woman in years, but I did work with her. And she had horrible back pain because her mother trained like otherwise untrainable horses. Her mother was known for like, if you have a horse that no one can train, send it to this woman. And she put her daughter on bunches of these horses. And this daughter fell off these horses bunches of times growing up. And so, when I was working with her, she's 40 something, she had back pain, which, okay, she's got a really logical reason for having back pain. She also really seriously hated her mother.
Mm-hmm.
She either went to Sarno or worked with someone who was trained by him. And guess what? No more back pain.
Yeah. His success rate is phenomenal. His thesis is pretty straightforward. It is that we sublimate all emotions that we deem as inappropriate. whether we got that idea from society or from our family or from some religious affiliation, doesn't really matter. What matters is that we sublimate them. And the ones that we sublimate the most are rage and hatred, because they are always seen as inappropriate by society, right?
I literally didn't know he went that far.
Oh, yeah.
And that's really important to me and connects directly to my work and how I even got to be doing my work. Like, I'm like all excited now. Like, now I do have to, because I didn't know. I mean, I knew the whole subject. I just didn't know he had the fulcrum or cornerstone, you will, of the rage and hatred thing.
Absolutely. In fact, I helped finance because I've had Sarno problems, and reading his books cured me. Now I've got some right now that I'm still working on, but I know the connection because I've read everything he's written. I've talked to people that knew him, and I actually helped with a Kickstarter campaign. There's a movie out there called All the Rage. And
yep.
And
familiar.
It's about Dr. Sarno, who's since died, but he had a long, great life, really insightful guy, amazing. And one of the reasons I became fascinated by him was not only did it help me with some neck problems that I had, but his theory was so, in my opinion, enlightening and his success rate was crazy. I mean, literally, he could take people who had to be on motorized scooters because they couldn't walk because their leg pain was so bad. And you'll actually see if you watch this movie, you'll actually see a person in the movie when they first go to Sarno, they're on one of these scooters. And at the end of the movie, all you see is them jogging in Central Park. And so I've always been a huge believer. Look, I believe our minds are these kind of quantum computers, obviously using a metaphor, but it's a helpful metaphor, I think. So creativity is absolutely required. Even if you're a quant, it's just you're creative about different things. Your insights and creativity all work around the various models or thesis that you might want to explore. Like, what if this was interesting information? Let's look at that. So I'm a huge believer in creativity, huge believer in the power of the mind. And I think you're going to really enjoy Sarno.
Well, now that you said All the Rage, I actually even knew that, but I mean, I was aware of that movie, but I have to say this, so I got that master's degree. I started trading at Schoenfeld. I was sitting next to a name you might know, Dimitri Balyazny of Balyazny Asset Management. Mm-hmm. He sat right there. Then I got this opportunity to run trading desks in New York. So I thought, that'd be really cool. So I moved to New York to run this trading desk. And I enrolled in a little institute of modern psychoanalysis, which is different than Freudian psychoanalysis. I mean, it has the commonality of you have an unconscious. Right. But other than that, it's very different than Freudian. Mm-hmm. And I rapidly learned that the founder of modern psychoanalysis, a guy named Hyman Spotnitz, had, and forgive me for this, but it's also true, cured schizophrenia through talk therapy. And the way he had done it is help these people get in touch with their rage, which to his theory, it was so overwhelming to them that they split it off into a separate reality. And so their realities were fluid. Mm-hmm. And he found that if he could get them through all of the pressure not to feel the rage, that they could reintegrate their personalities. I met someone, formerly diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, Bellevue, all the meds. And when I met him, he was a cartoonist for the New Yorker, married with 2 kids. As I always like to say, you're normal New York neurotic. But it was literally through the exact same thing. The idea that people have rage they can't handle. And the seed of how I'm sitting here is the evening I understood that in this little institute. I mean, this was a joke in some ways. I was like, well, damn, if it could help a schizophrenic, it could help these traders I work with. I literally said that out loud. And that was the seed of this. And then I think that was even before they published my master's thesis. So I had that. And then I found out you had to have emotion to make a decision. And then I started talking about it and people started relating to it. And I have a portfolio manager now that worries a lot about disappointing their investors. This person's really, really, really good, really talented, really skilled, really experienced, but has a tendency to hold back from doing what they really believe out of a worry, out of disappointing. But if you find out why, like highly criticized, has some anger about that, that they can't get access. So I don't know what percentage of time it is, but I spend a significant portion of my coaching time ultimately helping people sort out, like really it's a self-affirming. Like if you were really criticized growing up all the time and you just wipe that away, well, it was fine. Like I have another client who says, well, I was a really horrible kid and it's a good thing he beat me. No, probably not. And now beats himself up all the time, but can't see that. So obviously I completely agree with Sarn.
He was an amazing guy, and his research obviously continues. But let's get back to Danny Kahneman for a minute, because so I learned something recently that I didn't know about Kahneman, and I've studied a lot, all of his work. And that was that his original idea came when he was doing research for, I believe, the US government. And what they were doing, I think it was the late 40s, early 50s. And they finally had instrumentation that would allow them to watch pupils in people's eyes dilate or be constricted.
Right.
And they would ask them questions. They would ask them to do simple mathematics. They would show them pictures. So some pictures were very unhappy, very kind of like scary pictures. Other pictures were very bucolic, etc. And one of the things that he was quoted as saying was his aha moment was that we have and need an illusion of certainty, whereby we will, and it kind of actually fits with your idea about the human mind or brain being a predictive machine. Because
around safety.
Yeah, right. So, but what he says is, yeah, that's right. But what's happening is that we're creating order even where order does not exist. In other words, we are creating narratives that we tell ourselves to give ourselves an illusion of safety. And one of the primary reasons people make so many mistakes in decision making, not just financially, but in decision making, is that there's a great quote by Proust that we let our emotions determine decisions that are indelible, whereas the emotion was fleeting. I am getting it wrong, but I love the quote. I put it up and I said, anyone working with investors should kind of like make sure they read this.
Yeah.
So do you think that Kahneman's wrong around the...
I have to think a little bit about the certainty piece, but as you were saying that, what Lisa Feldman Barrett is saying and what psychoanalysis has been saying for as long as it's existed is that we grow up and we have experiences which create storylines of how things are supposed to be and how we're supposed to be treated, where we fit in the world, how much risk we can take, how much we learn our place and how we're to react from our environment.
Mm-hmm.
And what Lisa is saying, and it is what psychoanalysis is in a different way, but I don't even think she knows that, is that then we think as adults we're reacting to the moment, but we're not. We're playing out this narrative. We're playing out the storyline. We're playing out the expectations. And so Kahneman's illusion of certainty is very parallel to that. Like we're playing out a storyline that on some level, no matter how bad it is, we feel safe in because we've survived it. And like we're still alive. So in a fundamental way, our brain's working. It's saying this worked before, even if it was bad, it worked before, you're still alive, it'll work again. That would create kind of illusion of certainty of how things are, if you will. And because people don't know, they're predicting the future based on what they've learned in the past. And maybe what they learned in the past is wrong. Like maybe they're more competent or they're worth more or all kinds of things. They can take more risk. Or that reminds me of a client that took a lot of risk that mother wouldn't let him play sports. That I have all kinds of stories like that. But that wouldn't be that different than an illusion of certainty. So I think there's a way that I think the latest brain science could weave in. Well, you even think his original prospect theory, prospective, predictive.
Sure.
There's a connection there.
So then what you're saying, if I'm interpreting you right, is that there is room for kind of a unified theory, if you will, of some of the ideas of Danny Kahneman et al. And the behavioral, or the what I would call the consensus behavioral advice, and your way of looking at it, which you yourself in your book call radically different than those. So what do we learn from, have you ever read Timothy Leary's, his circuit ideas about imprinting? It's
I know of them, but I haven't read that much.
Because one of the things that, well, if you read about Timothy Leary, you realize that if ever there was a guy who got railroaded by the U.S. government, it was Tim Leary. And he also kind of proves my belief that don't fuck around with the feds ever, because they'll win and you'll lose.
Yeah.
But he foolishly kind of set himself up to be the poster boy and scapegoat, because the feds had decided that psychedelics were bad. And of course, if you look at current research, they got it exactly wrong. And they let all the drugs that were really bad be legal. and they sent you to FedMax for the ones that aren't even addictive. Anyway, the thing that I never knew about him until I read a lot of books by Robert Anton Wilson, who I think you'd also really like, is that he was a great psychologist. And his theories before the whole psychedelic drug thing were based on some pretty solid research that went around imprinting. That when you were talking, I was thinking, wow, she's talking about imprinting, because you're saying like the kid who got beat up by his father and tried to explain it away by saying his father was actually smart to do that. No, he wasn't. And that led to really bad beliefs, and bad beliefs lead to bad outcomes, usually, I would think. And so Leary had this idea that you're imprinted early in life as either, this is his terminology, not mine, and it shows how much society has changed, but you are either top dog or bottom dog. And you either had, if you were a top dog, you had a winner's script. If you were bottom dog, you had a loser's script. And the reason I found it fascinating was that I read other research that finds that you don't even have to change the person's perception of themselves. If you change the perceptions of authority figures, and this was research done, I'm sure you're probably aware of it, in a school where they came in and they said they were testing aptitude. They weren't. They were lying. And they randomly picked 12 kids from these classes and said, these 12 are exceptionally gifted. And then they came back a year later, and you can probably anticipate what they found. That those 12 kids had suddenly done significantly better in all of their subjects and everything. And the kids were never told, but the way other people, their teachers in this instance, interacted with and treated them changed dramatically. So I just think there's a Gordian knot here, isn't there? Because how do we disambiguate that, for example? So these kids all changed materially because their teachers started treating them differently. And did that somehow cause unconscious changes in the kids? Did they suddenly think, oh, I guess I'm a winner? I don't know.
It gave them a different feeling. The transfer of feelings person to person is a whole fascinating mode of study. Now, in that case, it's pretty clear. The teacher all of a sudden thinks this kid is gifted and didn't know it. So they're going to spend more time with him. They're going to give him more personal attention. They're going to feel more the kid's going to feel different. The kid's going to feel more important because the teacher thinks the kid's more important now. The teacher believes the kid's more important, and that feeling is going to get translated person to person. So Spotnitz in his work with schizophrenics used this called it might be slightly different, but there's this phenomenon of induction. We use it in our coaching. Like when you do this work, you find this happening to you. You'll feel one way, and then you'll get on the call with the next client, and all of a sudden you'll feel completely different. And it's their feelings, not yours.
Interesting.
It happens particularly when they're not feeling their feelings. They're not aware of them, and you pick them up. So then we use that as a piece of information. And Spotnitz and the modern psychoanalysts use that really with a lot of expertise, more than we do. I mean, we're adopting some ideas from modern psychoanalysis into a coaching paradigm. But I'm going to make an audacious statement, but I think it's true. You can explain anything in human behavior if you understand what the person thinks they're feeling and what they're predicting they're feeling. Anything. I mean, it's the sunrises in the east of human behavior. Now, not everyone's ready to hear it or wants to know it. Because really what people end up being afraid, if they acknowledge their rage, for example, they're afraid that they'll act it out and they know that that will be bad. I have a client whose life changed, really changed. It's a young man, not in investing. Through him being able to realize he literally just wanted to murder his completely narcissistic mother. And I mean, like the kid's never been there. It's been her in this sort of extension of herself, but not another actual human being. And once he was able to admit that and get comfortable with it, like he just started hitting on all cylinders, but people are afraid of it. There's something else you said that I wanted to reply to, but, oh, I know. So when I did my master's thesis, it's literally called The Neurobiology of Freud's Theory of the Repetition Compulsion. And basically Freud said we repeat things over and over and over. People get divorced, they get married again, they have the exact same problems. They switch jobs with one boss, they have the exact same problems with another boss. It's because of this imprinting. And I don't have a problem with imprinting, the word imprinting. Like we have this expectation, we have this script of where we fit in relationship to other types of people. Like in my workshops, I'll give the exercise of write out, what do you expect to get from people who are either like in authority, famous, or way wealthier than you? What you expect, because I want people to be able to realize they're expecting to have some sort of experience in relationship to these people with more clout of some sort or another. But there's a concept in biology called critical period. So like with birds, if they don't hear their own song during the critical period, they'll never sing it. So my hypothesis in my master's research is that we have a critical period for self-image, kind of who we are and how important we are. And will we be treated with respect and fairly? And do we have the right to be equal and succeed? Now, granted that all of those things are a lot of things that probably develop over 10 or 20 years, which isn't to say things can't happen that interrupt them, because things do. And then we play that script out, or whether it's Brian Newton's anticipatory affect or Lisa Feldman Barrett just saying we're playing out our expectations. There's a lot of people who've got the same idea, maybe slightly different language, but it's the same basic concept.
So let me ask you this question then. So is there a personality type that succeeds more in investing than other personality types, or no?
I don't think so. I think really the markets are aggregate human behavior, right? And any individual has a way of aggregating or interacting, with the markets that makes sense to them. They need to figure out what that is. But I think there's kind of a fingerprint analogy in there. It looks very similar, but it's not actually. And it's more about like how comfortable can you get with the fact that no one really knows and it's uncertain? And how do you navigate the anxiety that uncertainty creates? How do you understand, like I will often encourage people to come up, like write out their view of like what the markets are and how they work with a blank sheet of paper on a Saturday afternoon.
I'm a huge fan of writing everything out, because I believe that our memories are unreliable narrators, and you can't see them. But if I pointed the computer down there, you would see boxes and boxes of journals that I've kept since I was 18.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about it is I think writing is a forcing mechanism, because a lot of people, I've worked with a lot of people just mentoring. And one of the first things, the thing that I have found to be like a 0 to 1 improvement is people who have never written out what they think, who when they start to do it, literally I've had people, now it's on Zoom, but I've had people in person and then over Zoom just like get really emotional when we came back and they're like, I had no idea.
Right.
And I think that writing is that forcing mechanism that helps you understand whether you understand or not. The other thing I think that's great about writing is that when you can go back, I have a theory about our memories. And I think that there's some good information available that we unconsciously update our memories. Once the quantum probability function has collapsed, we forget about all the things that we were thinking might happen. And we truly believe that the thing that happened, however unlikely that thing was, that we knew it at the time. Hindsight bias,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yes. There's research that shows if athletes write about a failure, write out all their feelings, they get over it more quickly, as opposed to as my husband likes to say, rub a little dirt on it, or as most sports coaches will say, shake it off. Like, no, you need to go through the kind of grieving process, because number one, it helps you learn something. That's what it's really for. Like, what did I do wrong? How could I have avoided that?
Yep.
But there's actually now all sorts of information about the power of language.
We could do 3 hours on that. I mean, I'm so heavily into that. It's
literally emotion differentiation and emotion granularity. Like, differentiation is the difference between fear, frustration, disappointment, different categories. Granularity is like layers of fear, levels of aggression, levels of disappointment. Research shows, by the way, that portfolio managers who can better differentiate their negative emotions make more money. It shows that high school kids who can better differentiate their negative emotions study more, drink less. Like, it goes on and on and on. But there's this cultural pressure to not differentiate amongst our negative emotions. And I used to say that, like, the neuroscientists didn't know why language is as powerful as it is. I mean, I have some clients who call me once a month, don't really talk about anything that substantive, in my opinion, and tell me, oh my, it's so helpful. Like, they're putting things into words, like you're talking about putting things into words on paper, that they're not contemplating day-to-day life. They're staying busy with their family and their tasks, but they're not thinking about what they're thinking about. So when they talk to me or they put it on paper, and I had another point there that went out of my mind, but Lisa.
Well, we're kind of, talking basically about metacognition.
Yes. Lisa, in this recent book, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain, says that the language neurons infiltrate all of our organ systems. And that's at least the beginning of maybe how language has the power that it has.
Interesting. Have you ever read anything by Candace Pert, The Molecules of Emotion?
I think I have it on the shelf, but like most books you're going to ask me about, I haven't actually read it.
So she's unfortunately deceased, but she was very early in looking at what she called, obviously the title of her book, Molecules of Emotion, that neuropeptides and others flood our system, our entire body, with thoughts. They become things, and they actually flood our body, and we need to understand this. Anyway, if you have the book, you'd probably really enjoy it.
You know what? I'm pretty sure I think I quoted her in my thesis.
Yeah, she was a smart
I'm
cookie.
almost sure I did, because like basically Freud said this thing about repeating things. And I saw in my 20s that all my friends repeated things in their relationship. And I was like, if that's true, there has to be like a template in there.
Sure.
It has to be a template. So if there's a template in there, it's like neuroelectrochemistry of some sort. So University of Chicago has this Design Your Own Master's program. And I said, I want to figure out how that is. And lots of people would say to me, well, it can't be like neurons and electricity and neurochemicals. And I'm like, well, it can't not be. Like, it's not out here. I'm putting my hand out. Like, I meet this guy, I have the same scenario with him. I meet another guy, I have the same scenario with him. That's not out there. That's my behavior in here somewhere, behaving in a certain way, reacting to certain. It's inside here. So it has to be biological.
And it's also sort of one of the foundational principles of propaganda, repetition. And what I've written about is you can propagandize yourself.
Totally.
If you want to change a habit, one of the things that I have found is very helpful is repetition and writing, and then writing more, and then repetition. And I felt silly doing it. So I'll just give you an example. I wanted to exercise more consistently. I have a gym here, and I have no excuse for not exercising. And I was just lazy, and I didn't want to do it. I'd always let it get too late. Now I would do it like twice or 3 times a week, but I wanted to do it every day. And so I just decided, okay, I'm going to try this as an experiment on myself. I love trying experiments on myself. And I'd read a lot about this, and it was like, okay, so write it out and then repeat it and just keep repeating it. And you feel really silly for the first 7 days of doing it, because you're saying something that you immediately follow with, So one of the things I said was, I love to exercise. And right after I would say it, I would say, that's the biggest lie in the world. And guess what happened? About 25 days in, I would always have this thing where if it got past a certain hour, I would never exercise. So we were at my son's house for dinner and playing with the grandkids. And we came home, and without thinking about it, I went up. This was now 8:30 in the evening. I went up to my bedroom, changed into exercise gear, started going down to the gym. And my wife goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm just going to get a workout in." And she goes, "You never exercise at this time." And I went, "Yeah, and literally, and I'm really not kidding. I'm like, holy shit, that really works. Right?
Yeah, right. Right.
And so
you changed how you felt about it.
Exactly. And one of the things that I've learned through all this is that premature certainty is a really bad habit, because once we become prematurely certain, we stop really thinking about it. And it leads to lots of mistakes, I think. You can't force people to be open-minded. You might be able to force them to do repetition exercises. I don't know.
They feel threatened. So if someone's belief system isn't true, it's very threatening, because your whole angle on life is then maybe incorrect. And that's pretty scary.
Right. And it's like you have Robert Anton Wilson calls it we all have a correct answer machine programmed into our brains by society, family, religion, whatever. And that if that correct answer, I'm making air quotes here for those who are just listening to us, is wrong, and it's often wrong, by the way, and we can't change it, we're going to kind of suck at life. And
it's very threatening. It puts us in a really bad position, because then we know we're powerless. I mean, this reminds me of kids have a tendency to blame themselves because it gives them a sense of control. Because if they change their behavior, then their parents would change. And then what happens is people retain that blaming themselves and stay too self-critical. And so that's one thing, like in terms of how much agency do you feel like you can have?
Right.
But it also reminds me of something you said earlier. You said you like to think in terms of a hypothesis. And I always say, well, my theory is, I think it's for the same, obviously, it's a similar word, but for the same reasons. The point is, well, I know I believe this, but there's a possibility I could be wrong. And in both cases, we're making it like we're giving ourselves the feeling like it will be okay if we're wrong. Now, we probably both already have enough life experience to feel like it will be okay if we're wrong. We'll cope and navigate and we'll figure it out and it'll be fine. But not everyone does. But you can take just about any way that a person sees the world and navigates the world, never mind sees the market and navigates the market. And I never use this word, but I will re-language it to see how, like what the feelings are involved in that scenario. And then when people see that those are the emotional logic of it, it gives them more latitude of behavioral choices.
I agree that language is much more powerful than people might believe at first blush. There's another book, and I'm going to get the title wrong. It's weirder, but it's an acronym for Western rich industrialized people. And I did a summation of it on Twitter because I thought it was so good, even though it was overly academic. And normally I don't try to recommend those for general readers. But their so what was that all of the psychological research that most of us refer to is incredibly selection biased, because it's all like 93% of it is done on American grad students.
Right.
And they make the point that those are hardly universal findings.
Right.
And you brought up Asians doing math differently. And I instantly thought of that book because they back you up and why those societies are so different. So I'm looking at time here. Wow, this has been amazingly fun for me. I love talking about this stuff. But now I want to talk about the one that probably will be what everyone will really want to hear about, which is, and I didn't know this until today. So I was today's year old when I learned that you are the basis for the Wendy Rhodes character in Billions, and that you're suing them.
Yeah.
Tell all.
Oh, gosh. Where do I start? This is not a question you should ask me when I have like 5 minutes left.
Oh, no, you have more than 5 minutes.
When I found out about Billions, Andrew Ross Sorkin emailed me. I'd been on a show in 2012 about the book, and this was August of 2015. And he said, hey, I'm working on this drama. We've got a hedge fund performance coach in it, and she'd love to talk to you. Would you mind chatting with her?
Seems reasonable so far. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I guess. I Google it. I see that the show's been created and sold and it's going to come out in Showtime. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I'm thinking, where in New York should I have a glass of wine with this woman? I mean, there's so many details. It's like, it's hard. So many details. But so he introduces me to her. And before I know it, I'm in the writer's room with Brian Koppelman and David Levy. And I never know what's Levy and Levine. And she's not there. Now I realize that was all a plan, or it sure seems like it was a plan. And I told him a bunch of stuff. And Brian was really like, what motivates you? What motivates you? What makes you tick? Why do you do it? And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm not sure I'm making a deal with these people, which was the intention and what my lawyer had said. You go to the first meeting and I'll make a deal with them. And so I'm thinking, I don't know if this is turning into a deal and I'm starting to tell them too much. I think I'm going to go. So I say I'm going to leave. And Maggie brings up my book and how good it is and how much she's enjoying it. And Brian's like, I got to download it tonight. And I say, because I was embarrassed that it has a fictional envelope, fictional story in the face of a Hollywood screenwriter, I'm like, well, it's written as a fictional book and I play myself. I knew right then I was in trouble. Steam started coming out of his ears. What? How can that be? It's a nonfiction book. It's a trading psychology. What do you mean? Well, you said you were going. So in the meantime, David's asking me if I will continue to work with Maggie. Brian can't get me out of the room fast enough. Maggie's talking about the article I wrote about interviewing at then SAC Capital, trying to keep me in the room. And then I met my friend Josh right after that for a drink. And I was like, I don't know what the heck that was. Like, this is not good. Then the next day, I get a call from marketing. And they want to set up a conference call with me. And they want me to do a private screening of the pilot. And they want to sign a contract. And they want to know if I'll do a joint interview with Maggie. And I'm thinking, did I run my script or something? Did I misread that? And then Maggie and I communicate by email. And she wants to take our test. We have a talent assessment test. And then they all go dark. And I'm like, something about that is slimy. Like, I don't know what. But this is before the show's ever aired.
Sure.
So I communicate with Maggie a couple of times. And then marketing sort of goes into Never Never Land, really after begging me to do all this stuff with them. I never hear from Brian or David. I send them a congratulatory note, never hear from them. And so I thought, well, there was something about my book being as fiction, but I don't really know what, but like, whatever. The show comes out, she's a dominatrix. I'm like, oh God, I'm glad I didn't. But then as it goes on, that first season, basically people start saying, oh my God, you're Wendy. And then season 1, episode 11, it's called Magical Thinking. Axe loses a bunch of money. I can't remember all the characters' names, but the other guy who does the options trading is like, no, we need to get out of this. The earnings now, it's going to be bad. And he's like, no. He loses $485 million or something in 17 seconds or whatever it was. And then he and Wendy end up in this evening session where she's figuring out what was really going on with him. I get an email from a client in Australia who I hadn't talked to in 2 or 3 years saying, oh my God, that was just so show. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But so I just figured we had a truce. I'd help them. They cut me out. Everywhere I went, people would say, who knew me and knew my work, would say it was me. I never said I consulted until somewhere in the first season. I'd gotten calls from reporters left and right. And actually, there was an article that was about me. There was an article where a reporter called and said, I want to do a profile on you, which you're obviously never like Wendy. And this was before I'd ever said it. And I didn't say it in that article. And then they called Brian and David and they're like, yeah, we use Tony Robbins. And I was like, guys, that was kind of crummy, really. Like, the article was supposed to be about me. Like, you could have at least mentioned. So then the next significant thing that happened was CNBC Asia that I had been on had invited me. Well, not only invited me, they basically begged me to come on and do a segment about hedge fund performance coaches. And it was like, please, 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 it'll be great. It's 11:30 on Friday night, but we know that's our Thursday night for Friday morning over there. I wake up the next morning after really, like, I'd never seen a producer from a TV show like be this specific and this, please, to we won't be pursuing this anymore. I was like, oh. And then about 20 minutes later, another producer at CNBC who I'd worked with randomly unsubscribes from my newsletter, like particularly a producer. So I knew that not only did like they go dark, but there was some, let's just say, interruption of my media career, such as it was. Not that it was, but I knew because there was just no other explanation for those things. And then I figured we wanted truth. And I just started saying I consulted, which was the truth. And then they sent me a cease and desist letter in 2017 and said, those meetings were meant to be private and don't say you consulted. And so I felt like I had to hire a lawyer because that's like Showtime coming after me, my little consulting firm, telling me I'm doing something wrong, which I didn't think I was doing. And the entertainment lawyer looked at the situation. She goes, not only you're not doing anything wrong, you should shout it from the rooftops. So then back and forth for a long, long, long time, which I think was, we're CBS and we can give the little guy the runaround. And like, she won't be able to afford the legal fees. And then they like to say that I had to shop for lawyers and like anything else. Nothing could be further from the truth. And someone persuaded me that I really had a copyright case. Now, as it turns out, copyright is like really incredibly difficult. I've had other lawyers come to me and say the copyright law needs to go to the Supreme Court and be changed. And there's 100,000 other details, but like where we are today is I just want my day in court. The original case got dismissed on the idea that there's a bunch of performance coaches and there's nothing unique about me, with a bunch of technicalities that my lawyers say are like bad. I mean, like not the way things are supposed to happen.
So what exactly is being decided? You say you want your day in court. What exactly is being decided? Whether they infringed on your intellectual property, whether they infringed on your copyright, what is going to be adjudicated?
Did they actually use my book? And how much confusion is there in the public over whether I'm Wendy or not, which is called false endorsement?
Right.
So the standard in copyright is substantial similarity. And the reason other lawyers have approached me saying copyright law is a mess. And there's even, I just happened to quote a judge to somebody yesterday about copyright law is a mess. And district court judges are deciding it at the pleading stage without really knowing, this is what the judge said, without really knowing like the substance of the material that's being copyrighted, which that's what happened in my case. So copyright of market mind games and this idea of false endorsement, that there's so much confusion between whether I'm Wendy or not Wendy and have they benefited from it or not. The standard there is likelihood of confusion. And as one of my lawyers told me, he's never seen more evidence for actual confusion, which goes beyond the standard. But the original case was dismissed. So we've appealed it saying the dismissal was incorrect. I deserve my day in court. Oral arguments are May 20th. And so we'll get a decision on the appeal of the dismissal sometime soon. It's been a hell of a learning experience.
Yeah. So good for you. My strategy is pretty materially different. And that is I will do almost anything to avoid having to actually go to court just because I know too many lawyers as good friends. And I know that unfortunately, Lady Justice is not so blind. And especially on issues, mercifully, I haven't had any things happen in my life where I need to go to court. So I'm lucky, knock on wood. But there's just so much capriciousness to it, I think, in terms of just like back to behavioral research about the parole board not paroling anyone right before lunch, right?
Yeah,
why?
or in late in the afternoon.
Because they're hungry or they want to go home.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, first of all, like anyone who looks at every piece of evidence, like start to finish, my book was open in the writer's room. Like it's not possible that it wasn't. And when you take a real look at like what happened to me in terms of like all media opportunities drying up, now I didn't sue them for anything around that because It's like so impossible to do anything with. But those things really happen. And chances are, I mean, like the producer that unsubscribed had me on before. Love you. You were fabulous. Keep the ideas coming. Look forward to having you back. Same with other CNBC opportunities. So something happened. I think Brian Koppelman realized this is my theory, I could be wrong, but what I think happened is Brian Koppelman, at that moment I said my book was fiction, realized he had a copyright exposure. He may have known that Sorkin had already mentioned my book, but he knew he had a copyright exposure because it turns out you have more copyright exposure with a fiction book versus non-fiction book. And so he not only wanted nothing to do with me, he wanted me not to exist. That's my theory.
Well,
and he couldn't because they actually had based the character on me. And there's a lot of evidence behind the scenes that that's true. I mean, way beyond what I talked about. And so many people recognize that how she would work when it came to her professional work.
Right.
Sounded like me.
Interesting. Well, I shall be watching from the peanut gallery. As I said, I didn't know this before today. So I like learning new things. I certainly don't wish you the difficulties of having to go through a court case. Ouch. But I guess if you say you're learning a lot, then maybe that's a good thing.
As I said to someone the other day, all the worst parts behind me. All the journalists who aren't going to interview me because they want to be somewhere, either whether it's the financial press or the entertainment press. All that's already happened. But I put this on Twitter, and it's really true. When the lawyer who originally filed was persuading me to file a copyright case, and I was disinclined to do it at that point in time. It was the fall of 18.
Yeah.
But they persuaded me that I should. I thought to myself, I coach these people managing billions of dollars. I coach these professional athletes. I coach these Olympic athletes whose decisions are under the microscope, and it's really hard and uncertain. And what right do I have to coach them? I'm going to start to cry. If I back down, if I can't fight my own fight, why hire me? Sorry.
No, you don't need to be sorry at all.
That was the thing. I thought it's sort of unethical in a way. What right do I have to coach somebody who's under pressure, under the spotlight, high pressure, high consequence? If when I'm faced with a high pressure, high consequence circumstance of my own, I don't actually stand up. So here we are.
Interesting. Well, I can tell you, walking the walk is certainly different than talking the talk. Yeah. And Jung said something very profound. It is, we are not what we say we will do. We are what we do. So, in fact, I was talking to a friend earlier today, and they were talking about being calm. And I said, well, it's pretty easy to be calm when things aren't going poorly.
Right.
When the shit is hitting the fan everywhere and everything is going nuts, that's when it's nice if you can be calm. And so, good luck. Now you're going to have me following this. I might even have a Google alert on it just because I'm fascinated. Well,
can I say one more thing?
Of course.
The superpower is being able to answer the question, what am I feeling and why am I feeling it, and get both parts right. It's easy to say, not easy to do. But that's true when you were talking about calm. When you can go, I'm really agitated because of this, and get both those sides right.
Yep.
If they're right, you usually get calmer because you've got clarity about what's really happening, and then you can make a decision about what to do. And on that note,
would you repeat that one more time? Because I'm writing it down.
So when you get both sides right, what am I feeling and why am I feeling it? You get a clarity about your reality. And then I teach clients to do this all the time. And I have clients who will say, I had one yesterday, I can't get it. I can't get it. So I'm not getting any relief. So I was agitated all weekend. But he's learned in other situations where he's got the answer right, it calms him down. Because then he's like, okay, this is what I'm actually dealing with. Now that I know what I'm actually dealing with, I'll make these choices. But because people don't know how to ask that question, never mind, answer it. They're trying to assuage that prediction of a future feeling that they don't even know they have. And they're missing the information that the emotion is giving them. And then they're flailing around the issue.
All right. By the way, I always have a question for everyone at the end, which is kind of fun. And that is this. And this is perfect for you because this is kind of your job. we're going to wave a wand and make you the empress of the universe, or our little planet, third rock from the sun, for a day. And you can't kill anybody, nor can you inter anybody in a camp, a re-education camp. But what you can do is you can say something, and suddenly everyone will kind of think that it was their own idea, and they'll start doing it. What two things would you say if you could get everybody to say, wow, I want to do that?
Answer, what am I feeling and why, accurately.
Yeah.
And be kind to yourself.
Oh, those are two very good ones. Well, this has really been fun, Denise. Amazing and fascinating in terms of this whole Wendy thing. And like, I'm reading along and I'm reading all the research and what people have been writing about you. And I haven't read your entire book, but I've read enough parts so that I could have a good conversation with you. And I'm just kind of like doing the last minute thing. And I'm like, what's this?
Yeah. Yeah. I had a client who I just started with a few months ago who never heard about it and just heard about it the other day and has wanted to spend their last 2 sessions strategizing with me about what I should do in a PR, from a PR point of view.
That's really cool.
They started their session today. Like, I know you said Friday you didn't want to talk about it anymore, but I just got to talk about it a little bit more. I was thinking about you over the weekend, and you need to do this, 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 and this, and this. Like, you realize you're paying me, right?
Fantastic.